Leading our first in-conversation discussion around the power of coupling a high-performance culture with diversity and innovation is Kristen Bellstrom. Kristen is Deputy Digital Editor, overseeing the Broadsheet newsletter and Fortune's Women in Leadership and Business coverage. She also co-chairs Fortune's Most Powerful Women Next Gen Summit. And let me tell you, if you have not yet subscribed to the Broadsheet, you are missing out. So when you get a chance, go to Fortune, subscribe to the Broadsheet, and you'll get hit with nice inbox goodness. So let's welcome Kristen.
Good morning, everyone.
So Kristen will be joined by our summit co-chair, Kelly Greer, EY's US Chairman and Managing Partner, and the Americas Managing Partner, leading more than 72,000 people in 31 countries with annual revenue of $15.6 billion. Kelly chairs the U.S. Executive Committee and America's Operating Executive and represents EY in regulatory relationships. Her global leadership portfolio includes membership on EY's Global Executive, Global Practice Group, and Global Accounts Committees. She serves as executive sponsor for EY's worldwide focus on diversity and inclusiveness. During her 28-year tenure at EY, Kelly has had extensive experience working around the globe as a client service partner and senior advisor on Fortune 500 audit and advisory clients. Kelly is now a senior advisory partner on several of EY's largest accounts. She is a certified public accountant. Kelly previously was vice chair, Central Regional Managing Partner, where she led 10,000 professionals across 15 states and 17 offices. She also served as America's vice chair, Talent, where she focused on creating an exceptional experience for all EY people in the Americas and served on the Talent Executive Committee. Please welcome Kelly.
Come back this way. All right, good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Kelly. It's great to see you. So as we heard, you have a new job, new-ish. You're about 6 months in. And what's been the biggest surprise for you so far?
That's an interesting question. And there have been a lot of surprises, a lot of things unexpected, a lot that was actually relatively well expected, just given the roles that I had prior to being asked to step in and serve as the U.S. and the Americas chairman. I think probably the thing that has surprised me the most is just the pace of change, both that we're driving within EY, but also the pace of change through which our clients are navigating, their business landscapes, transformation around business models, as well as the regulatory and policy landscape, which is not only volatile, but really, very dynamic as well. So I'd say if I had to summarize it in a single thing, it's just the extraordinary pace of change.
And although you are relatively new in this current role, you've been with EY for about 30 years. And during your career, what do you think are the biggest changes you've seen as far as company culture, how workplaces run? What jumps out at you?
Yeah, it's also a great question. I think that frankly, the conversation we're having here at the Great Place to Work Summit, really around inclusion, diversity, and belonging, really for all. And I think that had been in the early days when I was, first really starting my career, that was not something that was really being talked about at all. And then the conversation eventually evolved to a recognition that we have to really leverage all of the talent in the marketplace to really drive business and communities forward. And the conversation became about diversity and really, pulling in diverse, people with diverse backgrounds and experiences. And that was fairly revolutionary, for its time. That has now become almost table stakes, I think, in most corporate settings, both boardrooms as well as in executive leadership teams. The notion of diversity and really unlocking the power of that diversity through inclusion, I think has become a fundamental element of how companies certainly endeavor to operate. How you activate that and the efficacy of that is obviously varied greatly, company by company, culture by culture. But I think that is probably one of the most profound changes from the moment that I started. Technology in its various forms has always been disruptive, right? It's always been a disruptive force. It's always been both an enabler of change and also a threat to those who aren't able to keep pace of it. And I think we're still talking about the Industrial Revolution 4.0 versus 3.0 versus 2.0. So while I'd say there's a pretty significant element of technology-driven transformation and disruption, I think it's the next version of what has been a constant over, really, the last century plus.
Okay. One thing you mentioned there was belonging.
Yes.
And I know that that is really a core of the culture at EY. Yes. So, can you talk about how you define that within the company?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, I do think it's different from inclusion. We're very intentional in talking about belonging. We talk about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, all three of those different dimensions. You can't have one without all three. And I guess the way that we think about it is, the focus had initially really been on diversity and really creating a very diverse workforce, diverse in terms of backgrounds, experiences, ethnicity, all elements of diversity. And it became very clear that diversity without inclusion was actually counterproductive. It wasn't only not accretive, but it was actually counterproductive if you had diverse workforces, diverse individuals forming your teams, but they didn't feel included. They didn't feel that their contributions mattered. It actually was more of a detriment than it was an advantage. And so the focus really did shift much more towards creating a sense of that inclusion, particularly for the diverse workforces that were taking shape. The way I'd characterize belonging is how does that really translate into the experiences that individuals feel and have within their organizations. And inclusiveness really promotes the processes and the culture that you seek to cultivate around that sense of belonging, but the actual translation of it on a very personal level is where that sense of belonging actually exists or doesn't exist. And belonging really is intended to encompass everyone, right? It is the for all concept, and it is very personal. I think you can have diversity and inclusion and be very, very successful, but the real magic happens when everybody feels a sense of belonging, that I belong here, that my values align with this organization's values, that my perspectives are valued and are sought after, that I'm encouraged to contribute, I'm encouraged to take risks, I'm even encouraged to fail, but to fail with the right support network around me, and that culture of belonging is, I think, the secret sauce of really driving an innovative culture.
And can you give a specific example of something that you've done at EY that fosters that?
Yeah, I'd like to say it's almost everything that we do. We are a talent organization, right? Our product is our people, and so we look for every opportunity for processes to really enable and drive that sense of belonging. I'd love to point to the story of Hassan Rafiq, who was one of the 10 finalists yesterday, who was one of our diversity and inclusion leaders here in the West region, who actually started his career 12 years ago as a very young staff in Pakistan, and became very committed to and actually got involved with driving our D&I agenda in Pakistan. From Pakistan, he was transferred to Afghanistan to drive a D&I agenda in Afghanistan. So you can imagine how very capable he was to have been given both that opportunity but also the challenge. And from there, with sponsorship of our Europe, Middle East, and Africa talent leader, became one of our leaders across the EMEA region, also serving from a D&I perspective. He brought that experience to the West region, to the US, and was given it was given an opportunity, really, again, with the right support and sponsorship, to take all of those learnings, that cultural sort of acumen, and to drive programs that frankly just didn't exist within EY around cultural agility, the belonging hackings that are described in his background. And so he's an example, a brilliant example of where you're given an enormous amount of latitude and sponsorship and support to try to do different things to really achieve your full potential and to contribute in a very meaningful way. It culminated in him having won one of our what's called a Better Begins With You award. And it's a global program. We have 4 global winners, and he's one of our winners, which really celebrates innovation. It celebrates our culture of belonging. It celebrates certainly the exceptional client service work that we do with our clients as well. And so it's the program itself, but his journey and ultimately his impact, as recognized by the program, I think is a great example of belonging.
Okay. And as the leader of the Americas region, how do you see your responsibility for creating the culture? What are things that you specifically try to do?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything more important in my role than creating the right culture and that culture of belonging. And I would say it has to start at the top, and what I mean by that is not just the tone from the leader, but really the actions from the leader, and how the leadership team really promotes and celebrates and ultimately cultivates and propagates that culture of belonging. So my executive leadership team is equally devoted to this sense of belonging, and really the notion that everybody counts, everybody's opinion matters, everybody's perspective and contribution and their competencies is essential to the ecosystem that is EY. And having that be sort of an ethos at the executive level that is then brought to the next levels and ultimately permeating the organization, I think is really how we activate it. You cannot dictate from the top belonging or inclusion. You can dictate diversity, but you cannot dictate from the top inclusion or a culture of belonging. You really have to model it. You need muscle memory around it. You need accountability associated with it. And I think that it truly is my most important responsibility.
Yeah. Last year, there were 2 complaints filed by female partners against EY alleging sexual harassment. Now, obviously, that must be a difficult thing to face as a company, and particularly as a new leader.
Right.
So talk to us about how you handled that, and specifically how you talked to EY employees about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I really believe in the Me Too movement. I believe in what it is intended to achieve. I believe in the principles of true equality and respect and safety. I absolutely believe that while it's a critical inflection point for the world, for society, for businesses, for the world, it's the right way forward. And I believe that the culture that EY is renowned for, and we really cherish and hold sacred, is one that shares those same values. And so you can imagine it was very, very challenging to have encountered a situation where the conduct associated with an individual did not comport with our values, did not comport with our culture. So not only was it difficult for us to sort of come to terms with it, but it was really an inflection point for us. It was something that we were going to address with vigor. We were going to address the issue. There are 2 issues. You mentioned 2 issues. They're 2 very different issues. One issue in particular, well, what you read about is not always fully fact-based, as you well know, Kristen. But what was known and what we were able to determine was not comporting with our values, and it was not something that was tolerable within EY. And not only did we aggressively pursue that particular matter and hold to account those involved with it. But we rigorously examined how could this have happened, again, in an environment where we feel that we've really got a strong sense of that belonging, safety, and inclusion. And we identified a number of mistakes that were made along the way. And we were very honest about those mistakes. And we came forward with our people. We had an all-hands webcast. I was still in transition with my successor, and the two of us looked in the eyes of our people, and we accepted, the roles and responsibilities that the organization really had, and committed to taking swift action. And so we made a number of changes to processes to ensure that we didn't have repeat issues. We certainly evaluated whether we had any other lingering issues that could potentially erode our culture and that system of values, and we took action in those regards as well. I felt that it was really important that we not only deal with this issue, address this issue, but actually that we lead through it. That we have a responsibility. So much of what we stand for is about our culture. It is about our values, and our people expect that, and they should expect that. But our clients do as well, and they very often turn to us for help and advice. And so I didn't want to just get through this. I wanted to lead through this, and we asked some outside experts to come in and help. In fact, Tina Chen, who's one of the co-founders of the Legal Defense Fund for sexual harassment, the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, actually came in and worked with us very early on and helped us to not only deal with the specific issues, but really find the highest bar here, really raise the bar and find sort of the highest standard of how you lead through this. And she's been brilliant. In fact, the two of us are actually going to be hosting an event on Friday, a live Facebook event where we're going to talk about this and bring this into the public discourse. Yeah, absolutely. So it was one of those moments of truth, right? One of those inflection points where you really had to call upon your values at the true essence of what they represent for you and the organization. And we chose not to sweep it under the rug. We chose not to just get through it, but in fact to establish an objective of really leading through it. And in that respect, being not just a role model for other organizations, but even a resource for other organizations as they, as everybody's grappling with how to really adapt to a totally different set of expectations, which again, I think are the right expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating to hear that. I think that there's so much to be learned from how leaders face challenges like that. So turning to a different subject, I wanted to ask you about a quote that I saw from you recently that really resonated for me. You were talking about digital disruption, which is something that we're going to be talking about a lot today, and how it's affecting workforces. And you were talking about retraining, and you called it a business and moral imperative. Yeah. So tell us, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, there's no question. It comes back to this pace of change question at the beginning of our discussion. The pace of change is absolutely unprecedented, and yet we probably are never going to move as slow as we are today. It's just going to hasten. The pace of change will continue to hasten. And when you think about the implications, the societal implications of that change, particularly the technology element of it, academia cannot keep pace with the learning required to bring the skills that are necessary to address what's coming down the pike versus how we're operating today. Organizations have to take a different level of interest and bear a different level of responsibility. Government is not going to be able to retool and retrain people at the pace needed to accommodate and ensure the stability of socio and economic dynamics that will, without a doubt, be significantly impacted by change. So I do believe that while it's a business imperative, you can't continue to be successful if you are not able to adapt your workforce at pace with the skills that will be needed tomorrow to solve problems that we don't even know exist yet, with technologies and capabilities that probably don't exist yet. That will threaten the future and the viability of your business. There's no question about that. Similarly, with the workforce skills element of this, to avoid the disruption on a human level, there is a moral responsibility to bring a totally different level of commitment to an investment in learning and development and the retooling and the retraining. And I do believe that the companies that will prevail long term are prioritizing that. They're prioritizing the development and the retooling and the perpetual retooling and retraining of their employees, not just for a business imperative, but again, I think to continue to meet the responsibilities that they have to society at large.
Okay. We'll have to leave it there, Kelly, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everyone.